Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Today, I'm joined by the Washington Post, Nicki Jhabvala, as we talk a little bit about the upcoming owners' meetings this week in Minnesota, what it means for the Commanders' sale. But then we get into a lot of football stuff because this is the first week we'll get a chance to see the veterans on the field. So we'll be able to go out to practice on Wednesday, watch how they're, watch the initial stage of the progression, because this is just a chance to see where they're at now. There's no contact, of course. And so it'll really just kind of be, you're going to get a little bit of stuff from that. You'll see how guys are moving, see how Sam Howell's looking, et cetera. But we go over all that and just how you use this as a kind of a step in the in the process of evaluating where certain guys are at, why those joint practices that Washington will have with Baltimore are important, et cetera. So we get into all that. And as far as the ownership sale goes, or before I get to this point, just a little bit of an update, and it's a minor one because I already told you the other day that we know that there's not going to be a vote at these owner meetings. So really it's going to be about to see what's going on in the process, how long could it take, et cetera. Now, on Saturday, a couple of us talked to Jason Wright out at a flag football clinic out at Commanders Park. It's now Ortho, Virginia at Commanders Park. It's a long sentence, but anyways, it's Commanders Park. And so we talked to Jason Wright, and he was asked about how long this process could take. Now, he's involved. Now, he's certainly not at the Josh Harris and Dan Snyder level as far as involvement, but he is involved. So he does know, and he did say that he didn't think it would take too long and that the process was, quote, headed in the right direction. So now the question is, how long is too long? And keep in mind that this is still a $6 billion transaction, and that always takes time. And again, it's always about the vetting of the limited partners. They all have to be vetted. So that's why it's going to take a little bit of time. I also think this is an indication, and Nicki and I kind of get into this, an indication of where the NFL is at with these sales, because it's hard to find people who can afford these kind of deals. Listen, just because you have a net worth of whatever it is, whether it's 5.6, 7 point whatever, doesn't mean you have all that money liquid. So it just makes it a challenging transaction, and one where you need to be maybe a little bit more creative than people have been in the past when trying to buy these teams. So now, it's possible, it's very possible that this deal isn't finalized until early July, because that would be, I would say probably we're looking at probably a month to 6 weeks or so. That's a possible timeline here. And I think we'll learn a little bit more at these owners meetings as far as how long it could take, and then when the actual vote might take place. I think there's still more to learn before we get to that point, but it is possible that this stretches into July as we talk right now. So there's a couple things. Then on the stadium, one thing that Jason Wright reiterated, that they're looking at all locations, Maryland, DC, Virginia. And the other thing is, and the question keeps coming up about in the story that Seth Wickersham and I wrote about the prospectus that the Josh Harris group was sending out, and they listed, that the team had told them that they could get up to $1.5 billion in incentives from the state of Virginia. And I think that phrase "in incentives" is very important, because people keep saying public funding, and there's a difference between the public funding and just incentives. What kind of breaks are they going to get, et cetera? Maybe it's all from that same pot, but it's not like they're going to write them a check for $1.5 billion and then call it a day. I think you're looking at some breaks along the way, how things are, and this could be over the course of a stadium deal where you add it up and this is how much it is. So there's a lot more to learn there anyways. But Wright reiterated that they're looking at all locations right now. And then, of course, it's going to depend on what Josh Harris and his group want, because ultimately they're going to be the ones who will pay for, at least, chip in and get the stadium built. So there you go. That was also something we had there. And then lastly, we did talk to Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator, at this same event on Saturday. And you can see we're going to run that entire video in the interview with Bieniemy on Ampire Media. Just know that there are a couple of times where there are loudspeakers playing in the background. So those of you who like to complain about audio, get your complaints ready, because it may be harder to hear them sometimes. But again, the decision's always like, this is still a guy you want to hear from. And while there are some times where you have some background noise, even if you're standing a foot away, even if you're holding a mic, it can be challenging. So just know, take a deep breath and fight through it. Anyway, but a couple of things that Bieniemy talked about is just what we went over is just like where they're at in the process of installing his offense, the challenges of that, and why he feels invigorated by this move. And I think there's some things that could be obvious. He was in one place for a long time. Now you're in a new place, and there are a lot of challenges that come along with that can be invigorating. And I think that's how he is framing this, and certainly how it comes across when you talk to him. We get an update, what he thinks, some of his early impressions of Sam Howell, Jacoby Brissett, some other players, some of the rookies, Chris Rodriguez. He was a guy that Bieniemy liked going into the draft. So why he liked him, et cetera. So all that stuff will be on the Ampire Media YouTube page at some point. Look for that. Also, I did write a story on Emmanuel Forbes talking to him about his 6 interception returns for touchdowns in college. It's a record. That's of course, again, a record. So how I went over each of those picks and had him describe what he saw or why he made the play he did. And it's funny because the lead of the story was, I did ask him, the plan was to have him watch the video of all these picks. He didn't need to, because they were all up here. And now there are a couple of them that really stood out. The Kentucky one was a major play. I mean, it's just unbelievably impressive what he did on that play and the screenplay. So go back and read that story. Also, he does admit when there was a lucky one, like the last one, the record-setting one, he admits like, yeah, he got lucky on that one. But what I also took away from that is just the pride that he has and how he approaches the game. He's very personable. He was also a hell of an athlete. And, people can look at the size and all that, but he's a really good athlete. And he had told me that he felt he could have pitched in college in baseball. He played shortstop, third. Told me he was throwing 94 miles an hour, but he played with a guy who was a better pitcher in high school. So he always got the plum assignments during, for the games. But that guy went to pitch in college and then ended up not being able to continue because of an injury. And then Forbes even said that he ended up having some elbow issues because of it. So he would have needed possibly Tommy John surgery. But anyways, the point is, he's a really good athlete, and that plays into, I think, why he makes the plays he does. And I think you have to understand, just when you talk to people about him, how quickly he's able to retain information and then transfer that information onto the field. And the other thing that he talked about in there is, he says, one of the keys for him is don't hesitate. And that's something his Darcel McBath, whom I had on the podcast, his corners coach at Mississippi State, one of the things he hammered into his players. But not everybody's like that. Not everybody's built the way where you can say, don't hesitate, but some guys do. And Forbes even admitted to me, he said that there were a couple of times his freshman year, he did hesitate on a couple of plays, but that was it, just a couple of times. Then he would make the breaks in the ball. And, and again, sometimes you're just in the right place at the right time. Not every pick is this unbelievable play. Sometimes you, like I said, you're in the right place at the right time. Anyways, that story is up on ESPN.com. Give it a read. And that's it for me. So let's get to my conversation with the Washington Post, Nicki Jhabvala.
The adventure park is ziplining through the trees. It's climbing from platform to platform. It's even an axe throwing competition with your friends. But what the adventure park really is opportunity. Reconnecting with friends and family, accomplishing a challenge, and making lasting memories. So book your visit today and choose your own adventure.
Nicki, the big question, I guess, for this week, there's a couple of things going on. We got the owners' meetings in Minnesota, and as we talk, we're recording this Friday. As people are listening to this, we'll be in Minnesota. Mm-hmm. The suspense was kind of taken out of that a couple of days ago, correct?
I would say a week ago. I mean, yes. we had heard that they would get updated about the state of the commander sale, but there wouldn't be a vote. And I think any belief of there possibly being one, I mean, yes, anything can happen. This is an unusual sale process. But these things don't happen overnight. It's not just, oh, they vetted Josh Harris before, they can vet these guys easily. No, it's a complex deal. It's going to take some time. So it's, this is not totally out of the ordinary. In fact, this may be the one normal part of this process so far, is that it's going to take some time to vet, because they always do. I mean, the Broncos sale, which had a fairly easy structure.
The Walton family.
Yeah, they're worth a ton, liquid assets, the whole thing. That took 8-9 weeks. Same with the Panther sale, 8-9 weeks. That's how long these things take.
Right. And you're right, because I heard the same thing when this purchase and sale agreement was announced. It was unlikely to vote in May at these meetings because of all the things you said. And I know people were like, why is it taking so long? Because there's at least 12 limited partners and they all have to be vetted. Mm-hmm. So, and this is, do you think this is kind of, and you're right, like this is a normal timetable, but I wonder too, like with the NFL, and we're going to get into, for people listening, we're going to get to OTA stuff in a minute. So just, settle down. But do you think this could be like more of the future of the NFL with these deals, because of the size of the numbers we're talking about and how they want to keep these in families and not corporations?
Yeah, I mean, the NFL they have the most stringent ownership policies of the, 4 major US pro sports leagues. They want one individual, not a corporation, not a group, to have control. And that person, if outside of a family, needs to have at least 30%. And when you're talking $6 billion and up, that's a massive amount of money that they need to have personally. In families, the amount is much lower. The family as a whole needs 30%. But if you have multiple members, a person with control, I think it's at 5% or lower. So it's a lot easier. They've made it so they can keep these teams and within families. But that kind of structure is seemed to be fading out. I mean, the Broncos sold, that was, Pat Bowlen initially hoped to keep it in the family, but ended up selling. There have been squabbles within families before. We've seen it with the 49ers. I would say the Hunts and Rudings are the most well-run teams, and that we've seen that, are owned in that team structure or that family structure. But yeah, I mean, the league is going to have to make some concessions given the values of these teams. There's only so many Rob Waltons and Jeff Bezos around that can just kind of foot that bill like it's nothing. So you're going to need multiple partners. You may have to introduce private equity. You may have to introduce some other concessions to find people who can do this.
Right.
Because up until now, the NFL could always say, why do we need to make changes? There are people willing to buy that have the money, and if Jeff Bezos buys the Seattle Seahawks, then they can still say that. But after that.
But there are going to be a number of teams coming up over the next decade, possibly. So I think it's going to be something interesting to watch. And you may not be able to answer this, but it still seems like ultimately the Harris Group will be able to get approved. It's just going to take time. But is that the sense that you're getting?
Yeah, I mean, I think right now we'll see. There's a lot of it is, the part of it is semantics too. What the league views as debt. Right. Hypothetically, the Harris Group views as no, this is a more creative way of structuring a deal, of creating financing. So they need to kind of close those gaps there, but it's also a complex deal because of the seller,
Right.
There's the indemnification piece, which we've, written about ad nauseum. So, it's a complex deal. So yeah, I think there's some confidence among some that this will ultimately go through. We'll see. I think it's the only deal on the table. Right. So I think the league would very much like it to go through, but it's not finalized yet. There's still some things to work through. And this is a league, this is a franchise even that has seen bids fall through at the last minute. I mean,
the Milstein.
Yeah, I bring this up not to be like the ultimate pessimist about this, and not in any way. I think you just have to be realistic about kind of what's going on, the complexity of this deal. And I know everybody wants it to go through and hopes it'll go through. And I think there are others on both sides, the league and the Harris camp, that certainly hope for the same, but it's just going to take some time.
Well, and I think the whole point is, so when people ask, why will it take a while? These are all the reasons why. Yeah. So that's why it's like, doesn't mean it's not going to go through. It's just explaining why it will take some time.
It's a massive deal. Yeah, there are stringent ownership policies. There are a lot of LPs, and the LPs, what's different about this one is, like, you've seen, like the Broncos deal, they added LPs after the fact. They had a very liquid buyer who was able to purchase it outright. So you can add LPs and then vet the LPs at your leisure. You're not on that time constraint to get the full deal vetted. But when you got 12 or more that are part of the initial purchase, they all take vetting. And if you got ones where you don't know their immediate source of wealth, then it's going to take even longer. So, it's part of the process.
Yeah. It's 6.05 billion. That's a lot of zeros. It's a lot of zeros. That's more than Nicki and I make combined. So just so people
just slightly,
just a little bit. Let's get to the field. So we also have OTAs this week that we'll be able to go out to on Wednesday after we get back from Minnesota. What are some of the things that you're looking forward to seeing or interested to seeing this week?
I'd say just seeing how the veterans working with the rookies, but also seeing how Eric Bieniemy works with all of them, kind of seeing the sort of the control he has over the offense. We got a taste of it certainly with the rookies, but having the veterans back, I think that'll give another glimpse into kind of the dynamic there. Of course, seeing Sam Howell, connection with receivers. It's a weird period for me because, a lot of it, they're just, you can't do live drills. You can't do anything like that. So it's throwing on air. It's, you don't want to make too much of it. It's good to see the guys out there, kind of see the connection they're building, but, they're very limited in what they can do. I'm curious to see how they align guys, if they start to experiment, like, especially in the secondary, especially on the offensive line, where are they kind of testing different players out, where are they envisioning certain players? Like, will we see Sam Cosmi move, inside? Will he play tackle, both tackle and guard? How do they envision that arrangement? How are they gonna arrange the, 6 essentially starting DBs they now have with, the addition of Quan Martin and Emmanuel Forbes? Those are things I'm looking for. And then, just seeing some veterans coming back. How does Logan Thomas look coming back? How does Cole Turner look? I know that there's high expectations for him. I'm trying to think of what else. Well, Chase Young and Montez Sweat.
I was going to add, that was on the list too. And how important is it that they are there? And I know these are voluntary.
Yeah. It's voluntary. And I don't personally like to knock guys for not being there. It's their personal choice, but they have a lot at stake for them individually this year. And of course you would like to see all the leaders of the team there. And it looks like most of them have been there just based on the photos that the team has posted of OTAs throughout. But they've been absent clearly, and for a few of them. So yeah, and we know it's important to Ron Rivera. We've learned that over the years. So it'll be interesting. It's not like they're learning a new scheme on defense. I'm sure there will be tweaks, as there are every year, but they know the system. It just, be good to see him. And it'd be good to see how Chase looks, after the injury. He only had 3 games coming back. Right. And so.
And I know, and you kind of touch on it, if you want to consider yourself a team leader, then I think that's something you should be at. I think one of the things, Nicki, too, and I'm curious your thoughts on this, because they are losing also that week of OTAs. And I wonder, there's an impact on that. It seems like it would be more on the offense because they're trying to put in a new offense. You have a young quarterback, you have a new OC, versus the defense where you're running the same stuff essentially. And that zone match is in the second year, so you've already installed that. It seems like, do you agree with that? Like that the impact would be more on offense than on defense, and I kind of go along with the Sweat Young thing. It's, is it as important for them to be there as if they were on offense versus the fact that they're on defense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, this is a whole new system. I know they try to kind of frame it as like, oh, we're going to make a few fixes. No, it's a whole new system, new terminology. Like, it's similar concepts, but that's football in general.
Right.
Everybody kind of runs similar concepts, but it's a new playbook, new terminology, new coordinator, new play caller, new quarterback, new interior lineman. It's a lot of new. And they have limited time already in the offseason, given the new rules in the CBA. So to lose that week is going to be tough. It really is. This is where I'm really glad they do have those 2 days of joint training camp practices with the Ravens, because I think that's always a really good gauge to see where a team is at. They can go against each other for the longest time, but at some point, they know the other side better than anybody else, So to see them go up against another team, I think will give us a really good glimpse at kind of where they are and learning the new offense, where Sam is at, just building that connection and, they're what they hope to achieve with the new offense, et cetera. So, I think that week will be a lot for the offense.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's led to some incorrect decisions the last couple of years, or waiting until the fourth game of the season to realize that certain players are in the wrong spot or can't play or whatever, because you're not seeing that in the summertime, because you don't hit in training camp the way you used to. So you're not getting those live looks like they used to. And also the other thing, Nicki, too, is, usually you get that week of mini camp, the mandatory mini camp, where they always put down 3 days on the sheet and then they cut it to 2. I don't think there's going to be any cutting this year, because you need that practice.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah.
And the other thing is going back to, because we did get a glimpse of Bieniemy during that rookie mini camp.
Yes.
I've given my thoughts on it. What did you think?
I mean, I thought he was as advertised. I mean, we've heard about, he's very vocal, very focused, very detail oriented. And you could see that. I mean, he was you could hear him from, 200 yards away. He wants his players to really take command. See what I did there? Especially in the huddle. I mean, he's hard on guys, but, with reason, I think change is good, but it really is interesting to kind of see him kind of go to work there. In a lot of ways, it's a very different style from Scott Turner and others. And maybe not others. I mean, you see other coordinators who are like that, more vocal, stronger presence. And I think that's good. I think they need that.
I do too. And it's funny because I mentioned the way, after the rookie minicamp about how he kind of got on some people. And there is a difference though, because like, if you're just yelling to yell, you become ineffective.
Right.
He certainly did it to make a point.
Right. He's always yelling something that he wants to see. He's not just yelling at somebody for the sake of yelling at them, Yeah. I mean, one example is like, when we heard this repeatedly is, I put the center in the huddle for a reason. He needs to take him in. Like we heard that many times, telling,
Yep.
the rookie centers they had there to, really get in there and kind of take control of things.
But it's funny because, and it is a different style, but I think one thing that I'm curious to see is the impact on the details of their jobs. And I always talk about, you get caught up in as a play caller, and that's obviously very huge for an OC. But if you can get him to adhere to the details of the position, that makes a big difference. And that seems to be what he's maybe more about. Yes. Or a lot about, I should say.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We also got a chance to see Emmanuel Forbes in that one. Yes. What did you think?
I mean, it's hard to glean too much from, rookie minicamp practice. They're in shorts, there's not a whole lot of live action there. The most live action is like 7-on-7 and a couple reps and, full team. So you don't get to see him going against, the veterans, but, he's an instinctive player, a quick player, very thin player. But I thought he looked good. Very curious to see how he looks going up against the veterans, going against the first team offense. So I mean, I think he's impressive for sure.
That's the thing. That's one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing is when he goes up against those,
Yep.
because that's a good group of receivers to help get him ready,
Mhm.
And I think that's one of the things because they're also, he's a very aggressive corner. And I think they're going to help him learn a few things during camp. And I think it's a good group for him to go against because like Terry is a guy that will share I think a lot of them will share information, but I think he was somebody who benefited from going up against veteran corners when he was a rookie. So, I mean, how much will that help him, do you think?
Oh, I can only help him. And he, in the short time we've gotten to know him, he seems like a guy that wants to be coach hard and will absorb that information. And, I think Terry's a great guy for anybody on the roster. But especially the corners who have to face him, and because he's a detailed receiver. Right. So they'll learn a lot and he'll share a lot, he's a good guy to go against. So I'm also curious to see, if they bring in anybody else, like if they have any other bigger receivers, how does he handle those? There's so much talk about his weight and his size and, how much will that affect him if it affects him at all? Maybe we'll get a better glimpse of that. Certainly, again, and those joint training camp practices in Baltimore, I think that'll be a good gauge too.
Sure. And then how does he offset that? Because there's always a way, like he's got strengths that he can offset that with, and they have to go. So how do you handle that? But that is something to work. What about in terms of the quarterback situation now? Because you brought up Sam Howell, and they also have Jacoby Brissett, and all we've heard is that the only guarantee for Howell is he goes into these situations as the number one. What are you expecting? What are you anticipating seeing from him? And then do you think there's going to be a true quarterback competition?
I mean, that's always the question. I mean, they've said in the past that we're going to have a quarterback competition and, that other guy doesn't take a single snap with the first team. I mean, I think a true competition would only help Sam. He does only have one start. And I think Jacoby Brissett is absolutely a guy he can learn from. He is that type of player who is known to be a good mentor, a guy that will help younger players in that room come along. He's also going to compete, and he's coming off probably the best year of his career in Cleveland. I thought he was undoubtedly the best quarterback they had last year. Deshaun, like when he came back. So, I think a true quarterback competition is necessary. I think it can only help Sam. But will it be? We'll see. I know everybody has convinced themselves that it will be Sam. And I know that, and they have said, we will give him every chance to win that job. And I hope he does go out there and win it for his own sake, but they haven't guaranteed anything. And so we'll see. And I think Jacoby Brissett is an experienced veteran. He's seen a lot more, which is not anything to Sam's. That's not his fault. He's just been in the league longer. He's seen more. So it could be interesting.
And that's where I'm at too, that it's not that I don't think Howell could develop. It's just that I think you have a staff that also has to win now right away. And you have who's going to give you the best chance to get off to that good start and all that. But, I also, Jacoby's a professional quarterback. I mean, and, so he's going to look good now. And I think guys are going to like that. But when you look at this situation, like what kind of things might you look for with Howell? Because obviously some of it's going to be growth. Jacoby could look better when we go out there because he's more experienced. But how are you going to kind of, just from your own personal standpoint, how will you assess where you think this is going, and is Howell getting it, or how does he look?
I mean, the two things that stand out to me always, especially with a younger quarterback, is body language and footwork. Is the footwork the way it needs to be? And we're looking from the sideline with the coaches will take a more detailed view. They'll be asking him things that, maybe we don't necessarily see. But I always think you can tell if the footwork is fluid, if he looks comfortable. And does he appear confident? Does he feel like, he's missing everything? Is he hanging his head? These are little things, and it feels sort of cliche for, a writer to point out these things. But I think you can kind of glean a lot from the way a young player looks out there on the field in terms of his confidence. Does he feel comfortable? Does he feel like he's learning? Does he feel like he's, the coach is just riding him for the sake of riding him, or is he learning stuff? Is he picking up? Can he see the difference between, a mistake he made on one play and how he corrected it on the next, those little things. So, I mean, those are the types of things I'll be looking for. I mean, again, it's with limited contact in OTAs and even training camp, you kind of have to pick where you really focus in on. Just because it's you can't fully replicate a game anyway.
Right.
But you got to bear in mind that they are, most of the time going against air, they're being told to do certain things, and it may work out, it may not. So
right. And I think the footwork thing is big just because that was the number one thing that we heard about throughout the time, from the time they drafted him to during the season, and all that was just kind of matching it up. Now he's having to match it up with a different offense, even though, as you said, the concepts are the same. It's really about the terminology a lot for him, but you
West
still
Coast,
have,
calls.
Oh man. But you still have to match up the footwork, and it has to, so I think it's as much like, is he getting the ball out? Is he hitting that plan step and getting the ball out? Is it, is it on time? Is it in rhythm? I think those are some of the things that you can see. And then to me, with how it's about measuring growth, like where does he look when we're not making the decision, so it doesn't matter what we think, but from their perspective too. But it is like, okay, this is how he looked on May 24th or whatever the day is going to be out there. This is how he looks at the end of, and the last mini camp. And is there a difference? Because he did
you want to see progress. You want to see an upward trajectory. Yeah.
Right. And I thought we saw that last summer from him, because early on, it's like you kind of, he didn't look great. And I thought by the end of camp, he looked a lot better, so, but I guess, what would be a true quarterback battle to you? What would it look like to you?
Split reps with the first team. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really
seen
it.
that. We haven't.
We haven't.
We heard about it.
Right. We've heard about it twice, really. We've said, they've said there'd be open competitions, and there's really not. So, we'll know pretty quickly if it's a real competition.
I also wonder too, Nicki, if they look at it as like, we're going to, if they say, we're going to give Sam every chance, let him get all the reps with the ones, because what Brissett can do, and he's a little bit more experienced. So maybe, you could wait and give him that time.
But it's still a, a new offense for Brissett. It's still a new team. He's got to get acclimated too. So
it's a new, right. And I'm pretty sure he's been in a system like this. He's been in a few of them.
Some version of the West Coast. Yes.
Right. But it is a new situation for him that he has to learn these guys too. But that's why I wonder, it'll be interesting to see how they handle it. And at what point do they decide, like, okay, and it may be because it's maybe less about how and more about Brissett and how he looks than it is. So like, if that develops that way, I think it could be say as much about Jacoby as it does about Sam.
Sure. Absolutely.
Well, Nicki, that's it. There's not much else to talk about. So we'll get a chance to be in Minnesota, and then we'll see these guys, get more speculation and conjecture about what's going to happen over the next couple of months. And that's what we do. There you go.
Can't wait. Let's go.
All right, Nicki. Thanks, Nicki.
Of course.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Nicki for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. Now, I'll be back possibly on Tuesday with a wrap-up from the owners' meetings in Minnesota, especially depending if there's something really worth talking about. Regardless, I'll be back on Wednesday wrapping up the OTA session that we were able to go watch. I'll give you my impression of what we saw on the field, and in talking to some players, etc. So stay tuned for that. That'll come out Wednesday, late afternoon, early evening. Again, early impressions of what we saw on the field, Sam Howell, all those guys. So stay tuned for that, and I'll talk to you next time.